Most people see their pets as family-loyal companions that offer comfort, protection, and unconditional love. But in rare and deeply unsettling cases, that bond has turned fatal. Behind closed doors, ordinary homes have become scenes of horror when animals raised, fed, and trusted by their owners suddenly turned violent, leaving investigators and the public struggling to understand what went wrong. Here are 5 of the most disturbing cases where owners were killed by the very animals they loved and cared for. On an ordinary summer evening in Ireland, the kind where doors are left unlocked and the biggest concern is what's for dinner, a family home suddenly became a place of terror. Sirens shattered the calm. Blue lights flickered against quiet houses. Neighbors stood frozen on pavements, watching emergency crews rush inside unaware that the danger hadn't come from outside at all, but from a trusted family pet that had crossed an unthinkable line. In Cork, a powerful bully-type crossbreed that had lived peacefully as a household companion snapped without warning. There was no intruder, no provocation anyone could clearly point to. Inside the home, chaos erupted in seconds. The woman never had a chance to escape. The attack was sudden, violent, and relentless, leaving her with catastrophic injuries before help could arrive. Paramedics fought desperately to save her as she was rushed to hospital, but the damage was already severe. The dog, once fed by hand, walked on familiar streets and was treated like family was euthanized by a vet shortly afterward. The house was sealed off, no longer a home, but a preserved crime scene, as investigators tried to piece together how a place of comfort became a killing ground. Then, just months later, the nightmare repeated itself. In Carlow, Gardaí were called to another residential property after reports of a vicious dog attack. This time, the victim was a woman in her late 50s, gravely injured inside her own home. An air ambulance lifted her from the scene and rushed her to Dublin's Mater Hospital, where doctors prepared for the worst. Once again, the dog believed to be of a restricted breed was euthanized at the scene. Forensic teams moved through the house with cameras and gloves, preserving evidence where everyday life had been violently interrupted. What makes these cases especially disturbing is what came after the initial shock faded. Neighbors described the dogs as family pets, not aggressive animals chained in yards, but companions that had never raised alarm. Dogs that had lounged in living rooms, slept near their owners, and been part of daily routines. Gardaí confirmed investigations were ongoing, while official figures painted a troubling backdrop. Restricted breeds accounted for nearly half of all reported aggressive dog incidents in Ireland last year, with hundreds of people injured. These weren't stray animals roaming the streets. These weren't guard dogs trained to attack on command. These were pets, trusted, familiar, loved, that turned lethal in seconds. And long after the sirens stopped and the headlines moved on, an uneasy question remained for families across the country. If it can happen behind closed doors in a quiet Cork estate or a Carlow home in broad daylight, how safe are we really around the animals we trust the most? On a quiet day in Canberra, danger crept in wearing a familiar face. Inside a modest home, a woman stood between a visitor and the animal she believed she understood the dog she trusted to protect her. What followed would unravel into one of Australia's most haunting and tragic cases of a pet turning on its owner. Tanya Kmpa was 46 years old when the nightmare began. Her dog, Simba, a cross Staffordshire Terrier and Pit Bull, had shown flashes of aggression before, but nothing prepared anyone for what happened that day. A visitor had barely stepped inside the home when Simba lunged, biting him hard on the thigh. The man tried to fend the dog off using his bicycle, but he slipped and fell. In seconds, the situation spiraled out of control. Instinctively, Tanya intervened. She dragged the dog away, shouting for the man to lock himself in the laundry. For a brief moment, it seemed like she had regained control. But then, the unimaginable happened. The dog she had raised, fed, and relied on for protection turned on her instead. The attack was brutal and relentless. Simba inflicted fatal injuries before help could arrive. When police rushed to the scene, they found chaos. Officers tried everything: pepper spray, a taser, desperate to stop the animal as they attempted to render aid to Tanya. Nothing worked. In the end, they were forced the dog dead. As investigators began digging into what led to that moment, a disturbing pattern emerged. The coroner's report revealed that authorities had been warned about Simba long before Tanya's death. There were multiple prior incidents biting her former boyfriend during an argument, roaming the streets unsupervised, becoming violently protective during confrontations. On one occasion, a neighbor had to strike the dog with a baseball bat just to stop an attack. The animal had even been removed by authorities once, only to be returned home later. Then there was the home invasion. Months earlier, masked men had stormed the same house late at night. During the violent break-in, Simba attacked one of the intruders. In response, the man sliced off part of the dog's ear with a and fired a gun inside the home. Blood, terror, and violence filled the space where Simba lived. The dog survived, but many believe something inside him changed forever. Despite repeated calls to domestic animal services, no decisive action was taken. The coroner later stated plainly that the laws at the time were inadequate and that Tanya knew her dog was dangerous, using him as a form of self-protection. Once agitated, Simba was almost impossible to control. After Tanya's death, statistics added another chilling layer. Dog attacks in Canberra had risen nearly 25% in the year leading up to the incident, prompting the government to introduce tougher laws just weeks later. But for Tanya, the changes came too late. This wasn't a random attack by a stray animal. This was a woman trying to do the right thing, trying to protect someone else, only to be killed by the very dog she believed would protect her. And long after the police tape was removed and the reports were filed, her story left behind an unsettling truth. Sometimes the greatest danger isn't outside the door, it's already inside, waiting for the moment everything goes wrong.
Birds are big and they're mean. Razor-sharp claws and a vicious kick that can pack a massive punch. Seemingly part raptor, part bird. One of them killing a Central Florida man.
On a quiet stretch of rural Florida land, surrounded by fencing and animals he had spent a lifetime caring for, a man went about what seemed like an ordinary morning. There were no warning signs, no crowds, no sense that anything was about to go terribly wrong. Yet, within minutes, a creature often described as the most dangerous bird on Earth would turn a familiar space into the site of a fatal encounter. 75-year-old Marvin Hajos had raised the cassowary himself. The massive, jet-black bird with its electric blue neck, helmet-like casque, and towering frame was not a stranger to him. This was his property, his farm, and his animal. But cassowaries are not like other birds. They don't flee when threatened. They charge. Investigators believe Marvin was near the bird when he fell. That single moment losing his balance was enough. The cassowary reacted instantly, unleashing the power it evolved to survive in the wild. With a lightning-fast kick, the bird's dagger-like claw struck Marvin in the neck, severing his jugular vein. Emergency responders were called just after 10 a.m., rushing him to UF Health Shands Hospital under a trauma alert. Despite their efforts, he did not survive. Authorities described the incident as a tragic accident. The bird was secured on the property as a death investigation began, while the state wildlife officials were notified. To those who knew Marvin, the loss was devastating. His fiancée of nearly 20 years spoke briefly, saying only that he had been doing what he loved before, quietly asking for privacy. What makes the story so chilling is the animal itself. Cassowaries are native to Australia and New Guinea, and are infamous among zoologists for their aggression. Each foot carries a 4-inch, razor-sharp claw capable of slicing through flesh with a single kick. They can sprint at speeds over 30 miles per hour and strike with explosive force. Even major zoos warn that a cassowary doesn't need teeth to kill just one well-placed blow. In Florida, the species is classified as Class II wildlife, meaning it poses a serious danger to humans and requires strict handling conditions. Yet across rural properties, exotic animals like cassowaries are still kept by hobbyists drawn to their rarity and beauty, often underestimating the risk. To anyone watching from the outside, it's unsettling. This wasn't a hunter facing a wild animal in the jungle. This was a man on his own land, near a bird he had raised and lived alongside. And in a matter of seconds, instinct overtook familiarity. The scene now sits quietly behind a gate, the cassowary still roaming the property, a living reminder of how thin the line can be between control and catastrophe. Because sometimes the most dangerous animals aren't lurking in the wilderness. They're standing right in front of us, waiting for a single moment to turn deadly.
The moment all 4 of his feet were outside the gate and Akil was next to him with that damned painful stick, that animal exploded with rage. It turned on its owner with grace and speed that only felines possess.
In the city of Kufa, Iraq, a man's dream of taming the king of beasts turned into a nightmare almost instantly. Akil Fakhr al-Din, a 50-year-old animal enthusiast, had long been known in his community for keeping lions and other wild animals on his property. He had built a reputation among neighbors as a caretaker of exotic wildlife, a man fascinated by the raw power and majesty of predators. But fascination, as his story would tragically reveal, can be deadly when it crosses into recklessness. Nothing could prepare him or anyone around him for the horror that would unfold in his own garden. Just days after bringing home a lion he hoped to raise and tame, Akil found himself face to face with the very danger he had welcomed into his life. What began as a seemingly ordinary day quickly erupted into chaos. The lion, whose instincts remained untamed despite its proximity to humans, attacked without hesitation. Akil was mauled and partially eaten before neighbors could intervene. When authorities arrived, the only way to retrieve his body was to shoot the animal dead, a horrifying conclusion to a moment that had escalated with terrifying speed. A neighbor, desperate and horrified, had already fired 7 rounds from a Kalashnikov rifle in a frantic bid to stop the attack. By the time police secured the scene and transported Akil to Al-Sadr Medical City Hospital in Najaf, it was already too late. The brutality of the attack and the sheer scale of the carnage left the community shaken. Social media quickly circulated footage of the lifeless lion sprawled in the garden, turning a private tragedy into a public spectacle and igniting intense debate about the dangers of private ownership of exotic wildlife. The incident exposed a larger problem in Iraq: the widespread and largely unregulated trade of exotic animals. Despite the country's ratification of the Convention on the Protection of Animals in 2014, illegal wildlife trafficking continues to thrive, driven by weak enforcement, corruption, and a booming black market. From African primates to Asian big cats, rare species are captured, smuggled, and sold to private collectors who often lack the knowledge, experience, or infrastructure to care for them safely. Akil's case became emblematic of the risks inherent in this shadowy trade, highlighting the deadly consequences when curiosity and ambition collide with nature's raw power. Neighbors and local authorities revealed that Akil had long maintained a menagerie of wild animals, keeping them in enclosures that were often inadequate for such dangerous creatures. Locals spoke of his fascination with lions, tigers, and other apex predators, and while he believed he could control them, the tragic outcome proved otherwise. Experts have noted that lions, even when hand-raised, retain their predatory instincts and can turn on humans in seconds, especially in confined spaces where escape is impossible. Akil's death is a stark warning of the risks that come with crossing the line between fascination and recklessness. In the absence of effective oversight, the line between pet and predator can vanish in a single, deadly moment. And for Akil Fakhr al-Din, that line was crossed forever in the garden of his own home. Even beyond Iraq, similar tragedies continue to occur. In South Carolina, a zoo worker lost his life after roughhousing with a kangaroo at a petting farm. Eric Slate's death underscores the same chilling truth. When humans attempt to domesticate or trivialize wild instincts, the consequences can be fatal. Exotic animal incidents, from lions in Iraq to kangaroos in the United States, reveal a terrifying reality. No matter how much care, love, or training is applied, wild animals retain instincts that humans may never fully control. For families, hobbyists, and collectors worldwide, these incidents serve as grim reminders that fascination with the wild carries responsibility, and that one moment of misjudgment can turn admiration into catastrophe. Akil Fakhr al-Din's story, brutal and unforgettable, is a haunting testament to the dangers that lurk when humans invite the wild too close to home. It was a calm morning in Limpopo, South Africa, the kind that West Mathewson cherished. The air was warm, the sky stretched wide and endless above, and the soft sounds of the bush seemed to embrace the Lion Treetop Lodge, where he lived, worked, and spent every day among the animals he called his family. To the world, West was a respected conservationist, a man who fought tirelessly against canned hunting, where lions are bred and killed for sport. To those who knew him, he was simply Uncle West, gentle, patient, and endlessly devoted to bridging the gap between humans and the wild. Every morning, he would walk side by side with his two white lionesses, Demi and Tanner, majestic, powerful creatures he had rescued and raised by hand. To outsiders, it seemed unthinkable, a man strolling casually through the bush, flanked by apex predators. But to the West, it was ordinary. It was trust. It was love. That trust would cost him his life. One quiet morning in 2020, West took his lions on another routine walk. His wife, Gil, followed behind in their car, watching protectively as her husband led the great cats along the dirt trail. For years, this ritual had been peaceful, predictable, but this time, something shifted. Without warning, one of the lionesses turned on West. There was no warning growl, no subtle sign. In an instant, muscle and claw struck with terrifying speed. Before Gil could react, her husband was on the ground. The lioness had attacked him brutally, targeting a vulnerable spot, and it was over, almost as quickly as it began. Gil did everything she could, honking the car horn, shouting, trying desperately to distract the animals, but it was too late. The very creatures he had rescued, protected, and loved had taken his life. No one knows for certain what triggered the attack. Some say the lionesses were playing too roughly. Others believe a flash of dominance between them set off a fatal chain reaction. The one certainty is chilling. Even animals raised by hand, nurtured from birth, remain wild at their core. Demi and Tanner were later tranquilized and moved to another facility, spared from death at the request of West's family. He had always said his lions deserved freedom, and in a way, his passing ensured they would one day return to the wild he loved. West's family was left devastated with 4 sons, 6 grandchildren, and a wife who had witnessed the attack unfold mere feet away. Yet amid their grief, they spoke not of anger, but of acceptance. He died living his dream, they said. He died in nature with his lions. It is a story that is both beautiful and harrowing. The tale of a man who devoted his life to protecting predators only to be claimed by the very wild he revered. West Mathewson believed in harmony between man and beast, but in his final moments, the delicate balance vanished in an instant.